I have a family of 9 and I use my oven extensively. So I'm going to be honest with you, it gets pretty bad. So I have 2 separate ways that I use of cleaning my oven. The first way is actually super easy and I like using it just kind of to regularly clean my oven. And it starts with half of a cup of dish detergent. I use Dawn sometimes I use other ones, but I always want it to be something that has a really high grease cutting ability. And 1.5 cups of baking soda. And then I just like to stir those in a bit, kind of makes a lovely paste. And then I'll add my 1/4 of a cup of white vinegar. This is actually my favorite part because it makes the suds up from having that baking soda in there. It's kind of an interesting one because, of course, your baking soda is a base and your vinegar is an acid. And so you would think that they would cancel each other out, but because of the fact that there is so much more baking soda than the vinegar, it doesn't do that. But it does make it so it's a much frothier paste and it makes it a lot easier to put on. One of the nice things about this paste is if I have any leftover, I can put it in an airtight container and use it again later. So now this is ready to go. I'll use my favorite dish scrubby to apply this to my oven door, and I'm just going to put it on half of the door because my oven is actually pretty bad this time, so I'm going to be using my other method to do the entire thing, but I want you to see the difference and see what your options are. I place the paste on pretty thickly. I try to make sure that I cover all surfaces of it, and I'll allow it to sit there for 30 minutes. Now I'll use a bowl of water and I'll scrape all of these suds off. I like using this dish scrubby because it's a little bit more abrasive than a washcloth is. If the oven isn't very bad, it won't need much scrubbing, but if it's been neglected for a little while, then it will take a little bit of elbow grease with this. I'm not wearing gloves with this because it's not really needed. It's a very mild detergent, but if you were concerned, you could always wear them. Personal choice. A little bit of the solution did get in between the glass panes of my door, and you can take your door off and separate those, but I'll save that for a different video. Sometimes if it's a more solid piece, I might use a razor blade, but you have to be careful about that because you don't want to scratch the glass. So that took about 12 minutes to do that 1/2 of the door. So now I'm going to show you my other method. My second method actually stems from my love and hatred of oven cleaner. I love how quick and easy it makes the cleaning, but I absolutely hate how toxic it is. Just to breathe in those fumes is horrible for both you, your family, and your pets. So I don't like to use this. But the primary ingredient is lye or caustic soda, and it actually is non-toxic as well as non-harmful both to your household and to your environment. So that I do like to use. When it comes to the pH scale, you have the acidic side of things that's all the way from 0 at battery acid to a 1 for stomach acid, a 2 for lemons, a 3 for vinegar, a 4 for tomatoes, a 5 for coffee, a 6 for milk, and then a 7 for water. So water is considered neutral. You can see how it gradually gets harsher and harsher the farther away you get from neutral. So that battery acid is going to be pretty hard on, say, like our skin. If I look at the opposite side of the pH spectrum, I've got my basic or my alkalines, and they start out at an 8 for baking soda, a 9 for toothpaste, a 10 for borax, an 11 for ammonia, a 12 for soap, a 13 for bleach, and then lye is all the way down at 14. If you consider that lye is just as far away from water as battery acid is, that gives you just a little bit of an idea of how caustic it could be. So if it sounds like I'm trying to scare you, I guess I kind of am a little bit. I want you to make sure that you wear eye protection and gloves if you're going to do this, and just are really careful. I actually love this method because it works so well and so fast, but there does have to be a fair amount of caution involved when using it. One of the reasons lye works so well is that it actually changes oils into soap. That's one of the things that they use during soap making, and it works really well for a cleaning agent as well, especially if you've got a greasy mess that's inside of your oven. But the one thing you want to keep in mind is that it'll change any oils into soap. So that includes the oils that are on you. So it's really important to do safety in this case. So eye protection is going to be one of those, and then wearing gloves is going to be the other one. This is why I don't always use this method, because it is a little bit more intensive in this way. So I'll start with 50 grams of water, which is 2.11 cups of water. And I want it to be cold water because when I put the lye in here, it will actually have a chemical reaction. And that chemical reaction will create heat, which will make it so that it gets very, very warm. In fact, you want to make sure that any of the plastics that you're using are good for the temperatures that will occur with this. And then I'll add 50 grams of sodium hydroxide or lye or caustic soda. There's different things that you can call it, but it's all the same thing. And I remember that I add the water first because you just kind of think of it as a snow globe where you want the lye to go down inside the water. And you have to be careful. If you have any grains of it that fall on the ground or whatever, you really want to pick them up. You don't want them to just sit there. And then I'll stir my solution. I always try to use an old wooden spoon for this because it tends to get eaten up a little bit. And I can feel my water is heating up already. I want to get it so that there's no more granules at the bottom. It takes about a minute or two of stirring to get it all fully dissolved. Now I'll place these in my sink and I'll want to wash them off right away just so that there's no residual lye left over there. As long as the lye is in a liquid state, it's safe to go down your drain. In fact, it's a component of Drano, so it can help your drains. It kind of breaks up the hairs that can get stuck down there. Now I'll pour my lye into a spray bottle, and I'll do it carefully because I don't want to splash. And in addition, I want to make sure that I have a plastic spray bottle that can withstand it. Then I place on the top. I'm always a little bit nervous right up until the point that it's all contained in my bottle. I then label it as lye and that it's dangerous so that everyone in my household knows that this is not something that they should be messing around with. If I had smaller children, I would make sure that I put it up high just so that I wouldn't have to worry about it as much. If you were worried about the enamel of your oven, you could always spray just a small portion of it and then check to see how it looks about 10 minutes later. If it looks good, then you should be fine. I haven't had any trouble with it with mine, and I've done my sister's oven too, and it was fine as well. So. Now what I do is with all my protective equipment, I spray out the entire inside of my oven. I make sure that I coat the trays really well as all of the sides. Now I have a hidden element, so I don't have to worry about getting around that. But if I had an exposed element, I'd just try to avoid it as much as I could. I do try to stay back a bit so that I don't breathe it in. I really want all of this lye to go in the oven. I don't want it going anywhere else. So I try to be careful in that way. You could use a cloth to do it instead, but I kind of like it being contained in the bottle. So then I use my dish scrubby and I just run it along the inside of the door. I always start with the door first so that I don't have to worry about leaning on it. I don't really want to get any of this lye on my clothing or on myself. And you can see how it just kind of melts away so much of that. There is still a few of the little solid pieces here, just like when I was using the other stuff, but there's definitely less of them. You could leave it on for a little bit longer than 10 minutes if you wanted to. Then I switch to my cloth. I try to get as much of that lye off as possible, and just with it comes everything else. And then the razor blade, but again, you have to be really careful because you don't want to scratch anything that you shouldn't. And in 4 minutes, I've gotten that side of the oven all done. So at this point, I'll remove my oven door, and I do that by going to the hinge, and there's a little bit that you have to open up on it, and then you can just pull it right out. And the next piece is for me to just pull these wire racks out, and you can see how the wire racks are they're already coming clean. It's amazing. The wire racks are actually my least favorite thing to clean, but with this, so much easier. Now I can get into the rest of the oven and clean, and again, I'll start with my scrubby. And you can just see it melting away. It's kind of insane, especially the stuff on the bottom. You know, that's directly where all of that grease is going to fall. I start by collecting all of that stuff that's at the bottom. I usually start from the top and I work my way down. Again, this one's kind of like the door, where it has just a couple of things that have been kind of solidified on there. But that will come up really well with the razor. Then I'll wash the trays directly in the sink, and I'll start off by just spraying them, and I'm always amazed how much of this baked on grime actually comes off right away. Then I start working at it with my steel wool. It's always amazing to me how fast it works because it's already been softened. Now my oven's all clean and I feel ready to go into all of my baking during the holiday season. Just in case you forgot what it looked like before, here's a picture of the before and then the after. So to sum it up, there's pluses and minuses to both. I really like my paste because I feel like it's good for a quick, easy cleanup, especially if I'm just doing maintenance on an oven that's already pretty clean. Downsides of this, though, is that it sometimes leaves a little bit of a residue and it can get in between the windows, and I don't really like that. When it comes to the lye solution, the plus sides is that it melts all that fat off, turns it into soap essentially. And so it makes it so easy to get things clean in your oven. Downside, if there's stuff that's really stuck on, it may not get that. You may need to do multiple coats of it or just resort to a mechanical method like using the razor blade. And then of course the other downside is that you have to worry about anyone getting into this, as well as having, personal protection, using your goggles, using your gloves, and just being really careful. But it does make it come off so much easier. So I love that one when my oven is really dirty. So if I've been super neglectful, that's my go-to one.